My guest today is Chuck Watson. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
I have got a hold of Hospice some time ago. This is an ongoing, it's probably 6 weeks to 2 months in the making to make today happen. Sometimes they just take a while. But I really wanted to talk to folks at Hospice if they could connect me with a family or a person who is dying so that we could learn from them. And they were never able to make that happen, but they did offer us Chuck Watson. And that's pretty interesting because Chuck has some incredible observations that I think that you will learn from today. So Chuck, let's start out with, how did you get started? You're a volunteer. How did you get started at Hospice?
Well, it's kind of a roundabout story. It's always interesting when you ask people who are volunteers there what their motivation was to become involved, and mine's quite different than most of them. Mm-hmm. Most of them were involved with Hospice because they had a loved one that was dying, and they just appreciated so much how Hospice helped the patient and the family that they just wanted to become a part of that and show their appreciation. For me, I hadn't had any experience with Hospice before. I got involved with Hospice because I was afraid of dying. And I was afraid of dying because I had been diagnosed with an incurable cancer, one that the first doctor said it's a very serious cancer. It's just too late for surgery, too late for radiation, chemotherapy doesn't work. The best we can do is a hormone therapy. That'll last probably about 4 years. The cancer mutates, and then that's about it. And it just came out of the blue. I just went in for a physical. I had no symptoms or anything like that. So, boy, when you hear something like that, man, it just turns your world upside down. And I was a mess. I was a principal of an elementary school, and I went to school, had to be brave, or fake like I was brave, try to be strong for everybody, but I was faking it. Try to be positive. You know, everybody says you got to be positive. Well, I was, but I was faking it. And at night, I was a mess. And
why? You were afraid of dying?
Oh boy, big time. Yeah, I just couldn't wrap my head around it at all. So I'm a believer in that which you fear, you have to face. If you want to get a handle on the fear and get control of it, you have to face it, even step into it. Otherwise, the fear controls you. So I started reading books on dying, death and dying. And my brother had mentioned Hospice and told me a little bit about it. And I thought, man, I don't think I could do that. If I got involved with that, I'd be watching people dying with cancer, and it would freak me out. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, it wouldn't let me go. And I went probably several months, and the school I was a principal with, excuse me, was on up off of Canal Drive, and I would drive up Canal Drive every day and pass Yelm Street, and I knew Hospice was over on Yelm Street there, and every day I'd pass it in the morning and think about it, pass it in the evening and think about it, and just wouldn't let go of me, for a couple of months. Finally, one Thursday, I thought, well, maybe I better call. So I called and asked them about volunteering, and I didn't tell them what my situation was, but they told me a little bit about what volunteers do, and I said, well, do you have trainings? And they said, yeah, about twice a year we do, and I thought, oh, good, I put it off a while. And I said, well, when's the next training? And she said, well, it starts tomorrow.
Oh,
so I said, well,
that was meant to be.
Do you ever have anybody go through the training and then decide not to do it? And she said, yeah, we do. So I thought, well, I still have an out then. So I went through the training that weekend, and I decided to take one patient, and that was, and I thought, well, okay, one patient, if it freaks me out, that's it. And that was probably about 15 years ago, and I've been with them ever since.
Well, that's incredible, one, that you have completely outlived the 4 years that you were given, and of your experience there at Hospice has been so big so big, and we have yet to hear more about it. So you've been volunteering now for 15 years?
I would say it's about 15 years.
Yeah.
'Cause it's been about 16 and a half since I was diagnosed.
So how many people do you think you've been with who have passed?
Oh, man. Probably a couple dozen. I never counted,
Yeah.
but there's been a lot.
And so you've created some interesting observations, and this is the key that I want us to talk about. But you know what? We're going to take a commercial break here. And what I want to tell you is that we would love to hear your experiences with hospice as family members. The phone number is 547-8726, or if you've got a question for Chuck. We're back with Meet in the Middle in a moment. Our phone number today is 547-8726. If you want to call and make a comment or ask a question, my guest, Chuck Watson. Chuck is a volunteer for hospice, and he has been for the past 15 years. He's also been an educator here in the Tri-Cities, elementary school principal. And Chuck, what else? You were at a middle school also?
I started out teaching in 1972 at Park Middle School, and then Hawthorne Elementary School, and then became an assistant principal at Highlands, where I went to junior high. Principal at Edison, and then principal at Vista.
So a lot of people know you. You took a couple of calls during the break there. People maybe want to ask you a question, but they'll have to wait. They'll have to wait till it's over, or call in on our show. So you've been with a couple dozen, you say, people as they have died. What are people who are dying, what do they think about? What are they talking about? What's important to them?
Well, most of the people I've been with, I wasn't there when they took their last breath, but there are probably half a dozen that I've been there when they took their last breath. Because of my unique situation, I was able to talk to them and tell them my situation, and that I kind of wanted to learn from them. And it kind of gave them a purpose in a sense, because when you're on your deathbed, you kind of lose meaning, and there's a danger of really losing any meaning and any purpose in life. And it was a way for them to help me. Mm-hmm. And so they talked. And sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger than it is with family, because with family it can be real emotional and difficult. Some of them just don't want to talk about it. And what I found after talking to quite a number of them is there's basically three things that are on their mind. I'd ask them, what do you think about? Do you have any regrets? What do you feel best about with your life? And those kind of questions. And what I found is there's primarily, this is a tendency now, but there's primarily three things that are on their mind a lot. Mm-hmm. Number one is what's next.
You mean after you die?
Yeah, what happens
you're not
after
breathing.
I die?
Okay.
Yeah, what happens? What happens now? And what I've discovered was that those who have faith in Christ have an easier time of it. For some reason, it seems like they're almost given a supernatural sense of peace there sometime in that dying process. I've even been with some that are looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. Those who don't have a faith, and some of them don't want to talk about it, they get angry if anybody even brings it up. There's a tendency for more fear, more anger, more anxiety, more restlessness. They need more medication for the pain. These are tendencies. But kind of what I discovered is the ones who have faith, if you answer the big questions of eternity, the little questions of life kind of fall into perspective. And the end is not the end in their mind. So it's much easier. It's easier for them. Mm-hmm. Number two is family. Will my family be okay? And it's important at this time for the family to let the patient know that they'll be okay. They'll be sad, but they'll be okay. It's okay to go. Also, if there's any unresolved relational issues, it's a big deal right now. And it's an opportunity. I've seen some miraculous healing within families take place on the deathbed. People take advantage of it. I've also seen some where the relationship issues just become even bigger.
Oh.
And it's a sad, sad situation when people are around and still can't get along. It's sad for the patient in that situation. The third thing that they tend to talk about is, or they think about basically, is they reflect on their life, what kind of life they had. And really what becomes important to them is, was I significant to somebody? They realize that, you know, possessions, power, position, none of that makes any difference whatsoever when they look back on their life. They realize how meaningless that stuff is. It's all about relationships. It's not how much you got, it's how much you gave. When I ask them, what do you feel good about, it's when I did something for this person without selfish intent, without wanting something in return. I spoke to a dentist one time who was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease, and he said he regretted the focus he had for so much of his life on making money, getting the big house, buying the neat car, building his business. In fact, he said it cost me my first family, that focus. And he says, I really regret that. And I said, well, what do you feel good about? And he says, I feel good about first of all, he said, I feel good that I discovered Christ. And two, after that, the transformation took place within me. And he said, after that, I kind of lost my selfishness. I was so selfish before and self-centered. After that transformation took place, he said, my life got so much better. And he said, my life has been so blessed. And he had a son who died in a car wreck. He had cancer at one time, and he's dying from Lou Gehrig's disease. And he says, my life has been so blessed. And he was the same age as me at that time, which was 54 at that time. And I just thought, man, how do you get that? I want that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I found it. And he says, I really feel good about the times that I started helping other people and did some dentistry, lots of dentistry for free for people who couldn't afford it. And he said, I just wasn't so focused on the money and everything else. I had plenty, he said, still, but that's what I feel good about.
Mm-hmm. Well, hearing these kinds of stories, how did that affect you?
Well, it certainly changed my life. You know, when I was in junior high, a friend of a group of ours, played on our baseball team, committed suicide. It was my first experience with that, and we were just having a hard time grappling with that. We must have been about 15 years old. And the question was posed, if you were going to die, would you rather it happen suddenly, get hit by a Mack truck, not see it coming, or would you rather know that you're going to die ahead of time, like cancer or something like that? Well, every one of us said, no, hit me with a Mack truck, or I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. And I mean, all of us. That was just an instant answer. But with my experience, I've changed my mind. The cancer has been a real gift for me in a lot of ways. It's not that I want it. It's not that I'm glad I had it necessarily. I'd like to get rid of it, but it's not going to happen. I'm not going to get rid of it. But it's given me the gift of time. And it's given me time to find that relationship with Christ that I never had. I mean, I didn't want anything to do with it prior. And boy, what a difference that has made. Mm-hmm. And time to fall in love with my family all over again. Time to get my finances in order. Time to get my priorities straight. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I can see how that is a significant gift, and one that people maybe should take more advantage of, even if they are in a situation of hospice where they know the end is there.
Yeah. Well, it's given me a time to come to terms with my own death, too. Mm-hmm. And with all the experience I've had at hospice, and I've seen some amazing things happen on the deathbed, just minutes before someone dies, or within even an hour or two before someone dies. And it's just so reassuring to see what can happen. And
I want you to
to
tell us some of those, because he has told me this in a pre-interview, so I know some of this. So please tell us what you have seen right before some people have died. I think it was the very first person you were with.
It was, and that's what nailed me to hospice.
Yeah.
And it's kept me there at least. I was assigned to a patient to go to his home. The majority of the patients with hospice are stay in the home, basically. And hospice comes to the home, and there's all kinds of people with hospice that help the family and help the patient in their home, depending on what they want. And I was assigned to a patient who was in his home to go on Sundays so his wife could go to church. And so I went about 5 Sundays in a row, and this gentleman was just fascinating. He was a World War II vet. He'd been in the Battle of the Bulge. They broke through the line, and they freed a concentration camp there. And the first week I was there, first or second week, he said, I have pictures. I said, really? He said, yeah, next Sunday I'll have them out for you. And he was pretty much confined to his lounge chair. Couldn't get up, so if he needed anything, I would get it, or his wife would have to get it. He was getting pretty weak. But the next week I went, and he had all these pictures of these prisoners, and it was just everything that you've seen. It was just a terrible situation. Then it had a picture of him and a couple army buddies with their arms around some German soldiers too. They all had their arms around each other, and they were smoking a cigarette. And I said, well, wow, what's the deal here? And he says, oh, we knew the war was over, and they were just as happy it was over as we were. He says the regular army, Germany, they were conscripted. They didn't want to be there. In fact, when the war was over, even they went after the SS soldiers. But anyway, I was about 5 weeks, and I was at school on a Friday. Got a call from the hospice volunteer coordinator that said they brought him into the hospice house because he was what they call actively dying. In other words, he had days or hours or minutes left. So after work that day, on a Friday, I stopped by and to see him and his wife. And while we were there, he was very restless. His wife said that he hadn't been able to speak in about 4 or 5 days to where she could understand him. He would mutter things, but she had no idea what he was saying. Unable to get out of bed, had no food, no drink for days. And while I was there, he kept looking up in the corner of the building, or of the room, toward the ceiling, right in the corner, and he wouldn't take his eyes off of it the whole time I was there. And I was there probably for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and he kept reaching, like toward that, the corner of that room that he kept staring at. And he was muttering and restless, and one time he tried to get out of bed, and the nurses were there to help him stay calm. And this was my first experience with this, and so I wasn't sure what to think. I thought he maybe hallucinating or something, I don't know. And after about 45 minutes, he started to settle down, and I left and went home. About 10 o'clock the next morning, Saturday, his wife called me and said, well, I just want to let you know that he passed away about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I said, how are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm doing wonderful. I said, really? And she said, yeah, you know how he was when you were there, and he kept reaching and looking up and reaching and looking up. I said, yeah. She said, well, he'd settled down, and he was just kind of thought in a coma, she said, and I just kind of expected him to stop breathing eventually. She said, I was just sitting there kind of reading the Bible and praying, and all of a sudden he called my name, her name. And she said, just as clear as he'd ever said it, and he hadn't been able to do that in almost a week. And she got up and she said, hey, what is it? And he looked right at me, she said, and he said, I love you. He's there. Jesus is there. He pointed to the corner of the room, and he said, it's beautiful, it's true, I'm going there. And he laid back down, and within about 5 or 10 minutes, he died. She said it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And I thought, man, that's exactly what I needed. And I've seen I've been with a couple patients that have done similar things. It's just, I don't know, so reassuring.
So the stories that we've heard, you can say to us at this point that you anyway feel that they are true, and I'm going to guess that the other family members do too, that there are people to greet us.
Yep.
I don't know about people, spirits anyway. Mm-hmm.
And they recognize them.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been some that even say that Aunt Mary is there, you know, or Dad is there, or you know, they'll sometimes even name people that they see.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's right before they die. Sometimes it could be a couple of days before they die. That is not an uncommon experience for them. Now, not everybody gets that, or sees that, or has that experience.
Wow, very powerful.
I think all the different, all experiences are different completely. I was with my father when he died, and he could not speak the last many days as well, and hadn't had any food or drink or any of that. But actually, when he did die, there was this, soon after that, it was like a welling up. It just kind of went through my body. That's how I felt. Like, ooh, there's something moving through me like that. And we decide what those things are for ourselves, I think. For me, it was his spirit saying goodbye. And so I think they're real. If you've had any of those kind of experiences, we want to hear from you. Our phone number today, 547-8726. My guest today is Chuck Watson. Stay with us.